Hello and welcome. Today we'll be discussing the North American automobile manufacturer, more specifically how the trade of tariffs from the United States could have an effect in the trade between Mexico, United States, and Canada. So, for starters, why would tariffs apply? So, since last year, the newly elected President Donald Trump had stated his motivation to impose tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China as part of his strategy of putting America first. So, the 25% tariff on all goods from Mexico and Canada and 10% on all goods from China uh, aim to provoke a response from these countries to an alleged illegal distribution of fentanyl and undocumented immigrants into the American border. However, more than 40% of the imports coming into the US originate from these three countries, among them energy, crude oil, and agricultural goods. Now, why is this relevant to the car industry? Well, for the almost $2 billion in manufactured goods that cross the border every day, the supply chain for the automobile industry is among the most vulnerable ones to the relationship between these three countries, as this industry is also central to US manufacturing revenue, as it generates almost 9.7 million direct and indirect jobs, creating nearly 11.5 jobs per already existing job in the United States. So this will help us explain why Trump would use tariffs as a tool to convince foreign manufacturers to relocate fully in the US in an effort to promote job creation nationally. Now, the supply chain for the auto industry is particularly since it has been for years protected by the United States Canada Mexico Agreement, previously known as NAFTA, which agreed to eliminate tariffs on certain imported and exported goods and allowed American automakers to benefit from cheaper labor, free trade of auto parts, and vehicles, and have an overall cut in manufacturing costs. So during Trump's first administration, the agreement was renegotiated to include loss of origin that would ensure that if a vehicle was made with at least 75% North American source parts, there would be no tariffs to pay. However, with the implementation of this 25%, there will be an added cost of $110 million per day for automakers. This because, as you can see in this image, the supply chain of car manufacturing in North America is deeply integrated between the three countries, with a massive network of suppliers, manufacturers, and assembly plants. So just to exemplify, for one vehicle sold in the United States, the parts have crossed the border at least 7 to 8 times before being assembled into a larger product. This also means that it's almost impossible to classify a vehicle as 100% US made, since its parts can come from anywhere in the world, not just Mexico, Canada, or China. So, this means that for American automakers, the Detroit Tea would be among the most affected by this tariff, since around 40% of the car, for example, Stellantis sales in the US, are imported from Mexico, Canada, as well as 30 and 25% respectively for General Motors and Ford. So this means that with these tariffs, there is a possibility of relocation for these American manufacturers. However, they will lead to devastating job losses for certain car manufacturing hubs, such as in Ontario and the northern part of Mexico, which would amount for around 278,000 job losses in Canada and up to 1.4 million for Mexico. While for the United States, it would be an initial 177,000 job loss from the initial 25% tariff, plus over 400,000 if there are retaliatory tariffs from Mexico and Canada. So, uh, the relocating the supply chain is a possibility for American manufacturers, but it would take a considerable amount of time and investment, since the sudden relocation would mean that there would be a tight labor market in the United States, the cost of construction, and there would be delays from this relocation, which would make producing in Mexico potentially more profitable than in the US despite these tariffs. And on top of this, Trump recently did a mandate to eliminate electric vehicle subsidies, which would put on hold billion-dollar projects from these American auto manufacturers to build facilities for this vehicle production. So projects such as for 5.6 billion EV campus in Tennessee and General Motors Oregon assembly would be delayed not only because of the EV revoke, but also due to the need to shift traditional gas production from Mexico and Canada into these plants. So this will also motivate Chinese EV manufacturers to tap into the present skills and the specialization of car manufacturing in Mexico to build factories and charging facilities for EVs, which would allow them to tap into the second largest market in Latin America. So, lastly, what are the future implications of this trade war? For starters, tariff retaliation on energy, oil, and agricultural goods from Mexico, Canada, and China could further the effects of the initial tariff, for example, in employment losses. Secondly, the possibility of a Chinese hegemony, since the decline of US China trade has made China diversify trade to new partners, including Mexico and the European Union. So, this would mean that the tariffs can further elevate the advantage of Chinese EV makers in the supply chains at the cost of American automakers. Thirdly, of course, the higher prices that the consumer would need to absorb, not only in the car industry, but in semiconductor, electrical components, electric equipment, and all the other goods in which Canada and Mexico decide to put a retaliatory tariff. Fourthly, the uncertainty of global value chains, as this gives a sign that the United States is inconsistent with its trade agreements, so it's a alarm sound for another U.S. allies. And lastly, the possibility of a very heavy renegotiation of the current trade agreement for the upcoming years. That would be all for today. Thank you, and I would receive any comments or questions in this topic. Thank you.